Welcome to Getting Real. I am your host, Monique Hom, and on Getting Real, we focus on authentic, real, raw stories around real estate investing, right? What's important to know and understand. And today we're going to talk about asset protection and why it's crucial for real estate investors. And we're talking about the real stuff. What's really important when you're investing in real estate is not just what you make, it's what you get to keep. It's not just what you make, it's what you get to keep. That's what helps with wealth building. And in our society, there are two main things that are going to, well, three things that could really take you down, right? Take away what you've got. So one is litigation. We live in a super litigious society, and you could get sued over just about anything. And often it is not within your control. So I'll give you a couple of examples of things that have happened to me. One, this is probably about 8 to 10 years ago now. Halloween, I was taking my daughter trick or treating. We were in a super busy street, and I had my daughter and my dog, who at the time, his name was Bear, and he was about this big, not very big. And Bear was dressed up like a hot dog. And so I had my daughter was dressed like a princess and my dog dressed like a hot dog. And I was crossing the street. I was actually on the phone trying to connect with some friends, parents of my daughter's schoolmate, so we could all go trick or treating together. So I'm on the phone, crossing the road, you know, leash and leash and daughter, trying to keep it all together. And then I hear, "Ow! That dog bit me." And I look behind me. I look behind, and I see that my there's this woman and her husband and two kids, and she's like touching her knee. And I said, "Oh, was that my dog that bit you?" And she's like, "Yeah." So I cross back over. She sits down. It's like a little bite, like that right above her knee. Bear was really small, but I guess he got up, bit her knee. It did break skin, was bleeding a little bit, but probably nothing that Neosporin and a Band-Aid couldn't have fixed. And she said, "Oh, you know what? It's okay. I have a dog. I understand." And I said, "Well, thank you for being understanding." I said, "My dog has all his shots. He's totally cool. But here's my card." I gave her my card. I said, "If you have any medical bills or anything, let me know. I'll cover it." And she's like, "Oh, shouldn't be a problem. It's fine." I was like, "Okay, well, thank you. Happy Halloween." And off I went to go trick or treat. About a week later, I get a letter in the mail from a lawyer. She is suing me over this dog bite. And the lawsuit ends up being she's suing me for, wait for it, $1.2 million. $1.2 million for this little bite because there was soft tissue damage, which is legalese for we can't prove it, you can't prove it. And because it was, what was it? The pain and I forget the language, but basically the psychological effect to her husband, and her two kids. So $1.2 million. And luckily, I had one thing in place that we'll talk about a little later in terms of asset protection that helped me deal with that particular lawsuit. So that was one thing. There was another lawsuit which is crazy. Uh, we we used to be flippers, and we were flipping houses until 2015, and then 2020, 5 years later, after we flipped this house and sold it, We got a letter from the buyer of the house saying that the floor tiles were cracked, and he ended up suing us. So this is 5 years after he bought the house, he's suing us over some cracked kitchen tiles. Crazy. Anyway, um, 5 years later. So, and again, it got taken care of, but these things can happen, right? And so that's one thing, litigation. The other thing that can take place that can take down your, it's really important for asset protection is, taxes. Uncle Sam, right? You want to structure things so it is more tax beneficial. I think we should pay taxes that we are legally required to pay. I think that's a good idea. But I don't think we need to pay any more than we need to pay. And there are one of the nice things about real estate is that it can be very tax beneficial, and so we can keep more of our money and put it where we want, and instead of maybe where the government's priorities are. Like in defense missiles and things like that. So I would, yeah, pay what you need to pay legally, but there are legal ways that you can use real estate to minimize your taxes, and that's another way you get to keep more of what you make, right? More of what you have, asset protection, and the last piece is. There are other risks, right? So environmental risks. You don't want to not be properly structured and lose your house to a flood or a fire, and not be able to recuperate. Yeah. So today we're going to talk about how you can protect yourself. And before we really get into it, I want to just share some common myths that people might have that really can set them up for danger. So one myth is I don't need asset protection until I have more properties, right? Maybe like I just have my house and maybe one rental. Asset protection is for people that have big portfolios, and that's not true. You don't want to lose your one rental. You don't want to lose your house. You don't want to lose any, right? Any of that. The house you live in also needs to be protected. So it's really important to safeguard from the beginning. Oh, I forgot. There's one other really important part of asset protection. So I said litigation, for tax benefits, other environmental risks like environment. The last one, which is very important too, is your death, right? So a part of asset protection and asset planning is to not just keep the wealth for you, but keep it in the family. You don't necessarily want to go and then have a huge proportion of your hard earned wealth, um, be lost, to the government, to probate, to all of these. There, it's a big problem. It's actually very devastating for a lot of families. They've mom, dad have worked so hard to build up something, and then but they aren't properly structured, so they go and so does most of the wealth. So all of those things are really important for asset protection. um, so myth two is that asset protection is only for the wealthy, right? So you might think, oh, that's just for like multi millionaires, billionaires, and we're not there yet. Whatever you have, you want to be able to keep it and grow it and leave it to the next generation. So every investor, regardless of the size of their portfolio, needs to protect their assets. Another myth is that doing asset protection, setting up your LLC, it's too complicated, it's too expensive, it's too much work, not worth it. And here's the reality: it actually can be very simple and straightforward with some help, and it offers such significant benefits that it is worth it. It is worth it. And one last piece is that insurance is enough to protect your assets. And the reality is that insurance is essential, and it is one of the main tools that we're going to talk about today, but it should be part of a comprehensive asset protection plan. So insurance is just one part of what you want to think about. All right, so let's talk about the basics of asset protection. So these are things that the basic things you want to think about. So first is having things properly insured. Right. So when I talked about the dog bite issue and the tiles, broken tiles from 5 years before in that flip that we had half a decade later, we no longer even owned. It was insurance that came in, took over, handled it. So it's super important to have the right type of insurance. And when you are right, there's homeowners insurance for the home you live in, but when you are a landlord, there are different types of insurance, right? So there's insurance as the landlord, insurance if you, depending on the size and the type of building, you might need insurance to cover what your employees do, director and operators, errors and emissions. So that there are different types of insurance. You want to make sure that you have the proper coverage for the property you have and the activities that are happening there. The next thing is legal structure. So if you have everything in your personal name, that leaves you open to a lot of liability. So if you have everything's in your name, your dog bites somebody, or somebody slips and falls on your property, something happens and they can pin it on you personally, then anything in your name could be taken, including your house that you live in. So when you have things that are in different types of entities and they're segregated, they're separate, like it's an LLC or corporation or trust, that helps protect you. So a property in its own LLC, something happens, that property is at risk, but not anything else and everything else you own, right? So that legal structure is important. The segregation of assets is important. So when you have things that are in your personal name and things that are in business names, it's really important that you follow the formalities of that. Right? So you have to have separate bank accounts. You have to treat you and the businesses as separate people because legally they are. And if you mix them up together, then you're going to lose that protection from liability. So you want to have the proper insurance, you want to have the proper legal structure, you want to keep things separate. And when you're putting in the proper legal structure, there are a few things that the legal structures can help you with. And you want to consider all of that and talk to professionals. So I'm not a asset protection attorney. So some of the professional asset protection attorneys, CPAs, right? Those are people you're going to want to rely on and talk to. It is worth it. But when you are structuring things, you want to think about how it protects you from legal liability, how it protects you from tax liability, and how it will be transferred upon your death, right? And can help with protecting your estate. And so all of those things are important when you're thinking about legal structure. And there are a lot of different types of legal structure, and they have different pluses and minuses and benefits, and different ones might work better depending on what you're doing. So there are some some of the main ones that you're going to probably be dealing with is, so first thing is you could have things in your own name. You can buy things in your name. Um, and that is uh, it's the easiest thing, but that does not give you any liability protection. It's certain, there are different tax ramifications of having things in your name. Um, and it will likely have to go through probate, where it can be substantially diminished if you were to die. So all of those things are, that's what could happen if it's in your personal name. And the more things are in your personal name, the more at risk they are. So different others. So when you may want, I highly recommend you look into having a structure. LLCs, limited liability companies, are probably the most common entity for purchasing real estate. There's liability protection. It's pretty easy to set up. It's flexible. There aren't as many uh, there aren't as many I'm blanking on the word. We are live. There aren't as many formalities that you have to do. Right? So, board of directors meetings and and things like that. So it's not as onerous, and and so LLCs, you can fairly quickly, you can in a few minutes set up an LLC that can own your property. So LLCs is definitely something to consider depending on how you are using the property, right? Um, Corporations, so you would likely put it into a type of S corp, which is a small corporation, and corporations are a separate legal entity. There's some different tax ramifications of having a corporation versus an LLC. Sometimes you have double taxation issues, so you definitely want to talk to your CPA about a corporation. You may be a more active investor, and as you know, depending on how active or passive you are, what your strategy is that you're using, how big your portfolio is, that might change what kind of structure that you go into. So corporations, LCs, corporations, there are a bunch of other ones. There's a limited partnership, LPs, that also has some liability protection. Um, Partnerships are kind of like um, sole proprietorship, owning in your name, and they do not give you liability protection. So, and it's very easy to set up. You don't really need to do anything formally for that, but there are risks to it. And the last one that you're likely to come across are trusts, and they can protect assets from creditor. They have estate planning benefits, not as much liability protection from a trust, but there are a lot. I'm not going to, on this episode, you're not going to know what's the best thing for you. Hopefully, what you get from hearing about the different options is that there are options, and you want to understand your options and what makes the most sense for you, given what your strategy is and given your goals. And the main goals are probably going to be asset protection, tax, looking at the tax benefits, and then asset planning. Uh, how it'll transfer upon your death. Okay, so with any of the entities, if a property is owned in an LLC or corporation, if you were to pass away, it stays in that LLC. It stays in the corporation. It does not have to go through probate. So all of that makes it easier for passing along these assets to your heirs. Okay, so let's talk about some steps for how you can implement asset protection and what are some of the the best things that you want to do. So first is you want to assess your current situation. Oh, you know what? I forgot to say one thing. I did talk about the insurance. I forgot to say, make sure that when you're getting insurance, that your insurance also will protect you against the right types of environmental hazards for where you live, right? If you live someplace, and this is the little different than landlord protection, whatever, but if the property is someplace that gets a lot of floods, you're going to want flood insurance. Get a lot of fires, fire insurance, earthquake insurance, if that's where you live, right? A lot of times your just the regular insurance, they might have carve outs for some of these very common types of disasters. You want to make sure that if the insurance isn't protecting you against that type of thing, that you do have insurance that will. You cannot rely on FEMA coming in and hoping that that will save you. You really do want to make sure that you have the right type of insurance to cover anything that could happen, because that would be devastating if you're in some place and it floods a lot, there's a flood, you're not insured, and you end up not being able to replace your property and you've lost it that way. So just make sure you have the proper insurance, the proper entity structure, and you're structured to help with taxes, liability, and planning for your planning as you pass. Okay, so what are some steps that you want to take to implement this? So first is you want to assess your current asset situation. So look at, what do you have? How is it held? What's your insurance like? Do you what do you currently have, if anything? The second is to determine the best legal structure for your needs. And I suggest that you don't try to do this by yourself. I suggest that you talk to some professionals, some CPAs, attorneys, people that will know how to help you, right? Asset protection attorneys and CPAs that understand real estate. Not all CPAs do. So you want a good CPA for that. So you want to determine the best legal structure for your needs. Then set up the legal entities that make sense. Transfer properties and assets to the new entities, and maintain the proper records and compliance that you have to for whatever type of entity you have. And again, make sure that you use the right professionals to help you with this. It's going to cost you upfront a little bit, but it should save you a lot down the line. Again, so some mistakes to avoid is mixing your personal and your business assets. It's really important that you keep them separate, because if you've been mixing them up, you are going to lose that liability protection. So that is a common mistake that people have. They've set up an LLC, but then they don't really observe the formalities of that LLC, and then it's basically useless. Another mistake is to underestimate your insurance. You want to make sure that you have sufficient insurance, and I have made the mistake of not having insurance that I needed for a property, and it cost me a lot of money. And it's not fun. So make sure you have the proper insurance, and then make sure that you don't neglect ongoing compliance, right? So you want to regularly update and maintain the legal structures, the legal records, right? So different types of entity, different states will have different requirements. So you just want to make sure you understand what the requirements are and you follow them. So that is the legal that is the asset protection. Um, I see Nancy and Donna. Thank you all for that. Hopefully that was helpful. Right now, we're going to end with our Trinity, which is a brag, a gratitude, and a desire. And we end every show with that. So my brag, what is my brag? I brag that I'm going to go see. It just got a friend of mine. It was like right before this, called me to invite. She's like, I have a ticket. I want to invite you to go see Kool and the Gang and Morris Day. And so I bragged that I'm going to go with one of my besties, my sister from another mister. We're going to go see Kool and the Gang. I'm super excited for that. So I brag being treated. I brag going to a concert and having fun. So that's my brag. I am grateful. I'm grateful for Kim for inviting me. I'm also grateful for insurance and asset protection. It has definitely come to the rescue uh, several times, and it makes such a difference. So I'm super grateful for asset protection. And I desire that for all of us that our wealth, that we build and we grow our wealth, that we earn and we earn more and we keep more, and what we keep goes off and makes more, and we're able to leave legacies, hopefully multi-generational legacies. That is my desire. I want to be able to create something that will that my great grandchildren will still be enjoying, and that is all part of asset protection. And my desire is that this is the same for you, that you have your great grandchildren thanking their lucky stars that they happen to be born in your line, because you set them up so well. So that's my desire. And I hope you all have a great, be well, and I will see you next time for another episode of Getting Real. Bye-bye.